We are in Credo Conduit. It is a collaborative space where folks are getting together, very multidisciplinary to work together, create a sense of community, and hopefully work better together. If you are interested in co-working space, meeting space, conference rooms, hosting events, please come and talk to me, or look at credoconduit.com. My life is kind of busy right now, but if you're very interested in learning more, there's a space to schedule a tour and also learn more from Kyle Still, which is one of the most amazing people that is helping run this, run Conduit. Beyond that, this is Rethinking the City. We have been going 7 years strong. I feel like we always get this number wrong.
2011, I think, is
forever. It's gonna go on forever. It's been going on forever. I'm really proud of it. We're maybe looking for new folks to help us with programming, but we're pretty set up for a while. If you are on Facebook and interested, reach out to us. If you're in the room and want to learn more, Eliza will be here to have a conversation about that. Woo! And I am really excited to introduce the folks that are speakers for this month from LYNX. This month for Rethinking the City, we are rethinking LYNX and having a conversation with these folks about LYNX Forward, which is, I think, has been a 1.5 year long study of route optimization throughout the system, with a specific focus, I think, for tonight on State Road 436. Miles O'Keefe is here from LYNX, and Jorge Barrios from Kielson.
Right.
Yes! We're really excited to have these folks. What?
That's 100%.
Have these folks here today to talk about State Road 436, which I think a lot of people have driven on, have experienced. There's a lot of employment, there's a lot of residential population, there's just a lot going on with 436. So love to hear more about it. And I guess from there, I'm just going to kick it off to Miles, who's going to be running both the PowerPoint and speaking to this.
Yeah.
As well.
Cool.
All right, folks.
Well, thank you all for having us tonight. Again, I'm Miles O'Keefe. I'm the Manager of Strategic Planning at LYNX. Going to go over just kind of high level what LYNX Forward is. I think everyone has a little flyer here to kind of flip through and get some of the ideas and the details on how we see the future of LYNX serving the Central Florida region. With that, we'll just get right into this. So, what is LYNX Forward? It was a redesign and an idea of like examining the funding strategies for services. So, pretty much for the last 25 years, the lines on the map have been the same. Maybe marginal changes here and there, some additional trips there. You know, you might add a late night service over there, but for the most part, they've been the same. So, like many systems around the country, a la Tampa, Jacksonville, Columbus, Ohio, Houston, Seattle, they've all gone through what they call a route optimization study or a comprehensive operational analysis. They're all just system redesigns, acknowledging that what worked then may not be working today and certainly will not be working for tomorrow. So this was our first real honest attempt since everybody else has been doing this, and we've done comparable things in the past, but it's always a new day, and technologies in the transportation space is obviously rapidly proceeding and advancing, so we've all probably experienced that in one form or another. And it's our attempt to see how we can leverage those and fight against those for all of our mobilities going forward. So it's really looking at what can be optimized. Some of our good is really good. Some of our bad is pretty bad. And then there's things in between that just need some tweaking in how we improve the services. So recognizing that today and for the past several years, it's really just been local bus service, the thing that we know and love that gets us where we need to go, stopping very frequently. Frequency of that service could be leaving you with something to desire a little more. For the most part, we look at 30-minute to 15-minute frequency, but a lot of it is also 60-minute on the fringe and periphery of our Central Florida service area. We've been able to leverage newer technologies in how we tackle some of the data and understanding our travel patterns. We completed a system-wide origin-destination survey using tablets over the course of roughly 6 months. So those are more like interviews with all of our passengers, truly understanding where they're going. That data is fed into both the overall route optimization and the State Road 436 project that Jorge will speak about. Recognizing that we were a little behind in some of the technology we've been deploying to our customers, real-time information that we all kind of experience in rail systems around the country and around the world. Just recently, in the past couple weeks, we've installed new display boards at LYNX Central Station. So instead of just a static sign of where each bay is, you can go and see real-time information, what the bay is, what the routes are, and then also some public service announcements from us up there as well. So we're very happy with that and hope to see that proliferating throughout the system as well. and really just working with our partners to develop that regional vision. So recognizing that each jurisdiction has ideas for how they want to see their citizens and their constituents moving around, and trying to best balance that, not just for them, but how that would feed into the total LYNX network. So there's primary goals we established. First and foremost, you always want to see something be economically competitive. Sustainability is a core piece of transit and this branch of non-automobile private auto mobility. And really getting to how we can support the quality of life. Personally, one thing for me is the H+T formula, so housing and transportation. Many of us are familiar with the fact that it is not necessarily the most affordable place to get around or to reside. The housing stock is limited. While we might not necessarily be able to control what houses are built, we can certainly work with our partners to discuss the proper location and siting of transit-oriented development and the benefit of having affordable elements to those developments. We know what our base is for our ridership. It tends to be lower income households with limited automobile access, that for 96% of them, they walk to the bus stop to access the trips or use a mobility device like a wheelchair or walker, that sort of thing, scooter. So the more proximal the housing and development can be, the lower the housing expense, obviously the lower the transportation expense can be, so that's how we're looking at the quality of life piece. Being equitable and dynamic and performance driven, so more and more, obviously there's a keen eye on how we spend our tax dollars and how we allocate our resources, so part of this is making sure that we're being good stewards with these resources and acknowledging that there can be improvements to how the service is delivered throughout the region. And a seamless network, so as it is today, it's not unfamiliar for people to have a 2-hour one-way trip, which is not a high quality of life and it's not very seamless. It might be 1 or 2 transfers, and the Florida climate is not necessarily the most forgiving. If it's cool out, it might be raining sideways, and there's really nothing we can plan around that, and mosquitoes are there, so it's how can we have these be quicker trips. In some instances, it might be more transfers, but it might be shorter wait times in between. It's also prioritizing the improvements and the amenities we see at our bus stops, maybe consolidating some so it can be one awesome bus stop instead of several okay bus stops. And making sure that the access is great to those places too. Every bus stop, like I said, our bus trip begins for the 96% of us walking or biking or using a mobility device to get to that. So if you can't get to, from, or across a bus stop, what good are we out there on the road in the first place? And then enhancing the customer experience. So we can always get better with communicating information, sharing the information. We've been working on multiple apps that have been out for some time now. We have Paw Pass, which is our mobile fare payment. There's C&Say, which is the safety app. We have NeighborLink, which for those fortunate to reside or work in NeighborLink footprints can summon the on-demand shuttle that'll take you and feed you into the fixed route system. There's also the real-time app, so that helps you track in real time where the fixed route buses are. Maybe allocate your time or very precious time. Instead of waiting at the bus stop, you might know you have some more time to stay in the air-conditioned building or finishing shopping or work before you head out. So the network redesign overview. Obviously there's trade-offs. So the big piece that a lot of the regions around the country and LYNX as well considered is it a frequent network or is it coverage? Today, if you looked at our map, it's a spaghetti monster across our 3 counties. It's a coverage map. So we'll be able to serve a lot of people with okay service. And we obviously want to get beyond okay and have something great, because that's how we start to finally move more of us out of our personal automobiles for not just commute trips, but for our everyday trips. Recognizing that there is a service typology absence here. We have local bus and NeighborLink, which is our on-demand shuttle. Outside of that, there's paratransit if you qualify, and we don't have express bus anymore. There's no regional express. We don't have really much limited stop service as it is. There's some, it's very commuter-oriented this time. So it's really recognizing that there can be a hierarchy that we can establish, and it would better serve all of us, both resident and tourists through Central Florida. Benefits of some of these are obviously reliability. So we can be out there and we can put out the best schedule we can, but traffic is unpredictable, collisions and crashes are unpredictable. So what kind of services, what kind of operating environments are the most reliable for us? What kind of projects do we need to pursue to support greater reliability of our mobility? Improved frequency is something that the public will let us know, to no surprise, that they would like to see more of. And more direct routing. So some people do experience numerous transfers now in terms of the frequency versus coverage trade-off, you might have actually more transfers than you would today, but if the trips are more frequent, and you might have, say, dedicated busways, if you build those sorts of things, then it's not as much of an issue. There's obviously kind of like a pilot level to this. So how do you end up testing this and phasing this? We've been running models internally to see how we can start to implement this, what with the limited resources we do have, we can deploy better services and the impacts that has on our existing ridership. So that's still being worked out and is part of continued work on really making the ROS or the route optimization study a reality, LYNX Forward a reality. And then the feedback and the expectations. So there are winners and losers, unfortunately. If you change anything, it impacts somebody. The plan is obviously to benefit more people than to negatively impact. Those of you familiar with HART in Tampa, there were a good number of people that were on the losing side of the services, but overall net, more people saw greater increase in frequency of their transit throughout the Hillsborough County area. So like I mentioned, there's a hierarchy and there's layers to all this. So it's recognizing that we do need more express service here in Central Florida. We have a core network that's never going to go away. Those are things like State Road 50, State Road 436, US 192, 441, 1792. These roads will always be there. These roads we will always operate on. How can we improve that environment in which we operate and improve the frequency of the services there? Sunrail is a spine. These roads obviously connect and feed into that spine. They relate to the I-4 network really strong. So that is something that we want to build upon in terms of a higher frequency service. That does not ignore any kind of primary local network. So we envision still a local level with like a limited level on top of that on these core roads, the 50s, the 436s, etc. But there's also secondary roads that are very important to all of us. Things like Pine Hills Road, Kirkman, Hiawassee, 434. So that there's still very large roads, still very occupied and high activity center counts along these roadways. But they're not necessarily to the span of service or the frequency of service that we would see with our core routes. And then there's secondary and circulators. So we know it, we live it. There's a lot of lakes and a lot of gated communities here in Central Florida. So how do we navigate those areas more appropriately instead of with 60-foot buses or 40-foot buses? Is it something we might see comparable in size to what UCF operates, or is it even smaller than that and we're more dynamic and nimble within those areas? And then it gets really down into that on-demand and flexible service. Building upon our neighborly network that we see today, it's 12 to 14 passenger shuttles that you can utilize a mobile device or a desktop computer to summon the ride within 15 minutes, hopefully. It shows up and it gets you to a destination within a designated footprint, door to door, kind of curb to curb. If you're fortunate to live near activity centers, it would take you to that and not just a fixed route service or a Sunrail service. So it's really kind of like a cake. If I was Shrek, I'd say it's an onion of service, but that's where we are. So as we were working through all of this, it's getting to the concept. So on the far left, it's bare minimum. It's building really upon what we have today. A lot of local bus service, some of that on-demand service, and it's, if you can see the little like Pac-Man dots in there, it's like light levels of limited stop and small levels of regional express type service. As we move into the middle, it's maybe scaling back some of that local service, beefing up a little bit of that limited stop, that express, and obviously more of those on-demand kind of LYNX pink shaded areas. And then going to the concept 3, it's like the polar opposite of the first one. So it's a lot of on-demand, very little local bus service, and a lot of limited stops. So it's thinking about those hyper-local trips and then how they relate to more of the regional trips throughout Central Florida. So in a perfect world, this would have sequenced for us, but it didn't. So really what we're seeing here is the culmination of all these kind of services, the gray being the current and the additive on-demand areas, the red being our core areas where we see both local bus and a limited stop network building out. Sunrail obviously being a big component running in the center of it all. Those purple and blue lines are more of our primary and secondary local bus services, still kind of stopping with the regularity that we see today. The green lines mean some of those regional express routes, maybe 3 or 4 stops on each end, serving the high emphasis on our major activity centers, UCF, the Universal, iDrive area, Disney, the airport, down to Kissimmee, and some up into Seminole County, looking at Seminole State College and some of those stations up there. So looking at the fact that we all make trips differently, And this is obviously a very long-term plan for all the networks. So it's not something we can do overnight. We would love to do that, but there's resources that are not available to us today that we have to work towards as a region, so we can have the most appropriate service for us as we grow and move forward. I broke it.
And he's still trying to go through the animation. Click it a few more times. It snaps out of it.
Okay, so why does this relate to 436? So I talked about the limited stop and I talked about our primary corridors. So part of the evolution of these limited stop corridors on like 436 is that eventually you build out something more. So at a certain point, you can only put so much frequency on a road with be it limited stop or local bus service, and then you max out the potential. We behave like a gas and not like a liquid on the roadway, but there's still a break point where you can only fit so much. You can only be a comfortable environment for so many pedestrians and dealing with the signal timing and the phasing, that you really have to start thinking about dedicated facilities. A lot of regions now are, like Albuquerque and Salt Lake City, are deploying a limited stop service as a proof of concept, and then moving forward into the reality of light rail or bus rapid transit, or bus rapid transit moving into light rail. So that's really where this study brings us, and Jorge will get into more of the good bits on that. But for this project, we began to examine a 23-mile stretch of 436 from the new intermodal center at Orlando International Airport all the way up to State Road 434. With that, there are 11 links or routes that operate along or across this corridor in some capacity today. We have 3 super stops or transfer centers along the corridor, being Orlando International Airport, Dixie Belle and Gatlin, where there's a Social Security office, and then up at the intersection of 436 and 1792. That's our Fern Park super stop. So Fern Park and the airport account for 4% of all the bus stop activity. So that's 2 stops out of 4,300 stops that account for 4% of our 80-something thousand trips a day. They're transfer centers, so obviously you expect that to happen, but it's still a lot of activity happening in 2 spots within our whole system. So we have great anchors to build upon, not to mention great partners that we're able to work with. So coming to the table to support this was Orange County, the City of Orlando, Seminole County, and FDOT. But of course we've been working with the likes of Metroplan Orlando, Central Florida Expressway, because they have roads that connect to the airport in 436, as well as all the municipalities that have some sort of relationship. They might not be immediately on the corridor, but they were within our 1-mile study radius buffer. So that's why you see Winter Park and Maitland invited to this as well, because we just want to make sure everybody that has a relationship potentially with this roadway has a chance to provide some kind of feedback on it. With that, I will pass it on to Jorge.
Great. Thank you, Miles. So, Sarah mentioned, my name is Jorge Barrios, and I work with Kittleson Associates. We've been the prime consultant helping LYNX on this project for the past couple of years. So before I go into that, I want to ask if somebody here knows why this road is called Semoran.
Seminole and Orange County?
Correct, yes.
Was that a contest that they did that came up with it?
Seminole and Orange County. So as Miles was saying, there's a lot of jurisdictions in these 23 miles that we looked at. So it took a lot of effort in outreach and engaging them, making sure that everybody's represented and their feedback makes its way to us. So I wanted to highlight some of these you won't be able to read from far away, but why 436? Did you guys know that the densest census tract in all of Central Florida is on 436? It's not here in downtown. It's just 436 and Curry Ford Road. So it's a lot of residential apartments there. So yeah, go figure. The corridor as a whole is home to about 200,000 residents, 100,000 jobs. There's a good mix of both residents and jobs on 436. Also has a, it's been there for a little while now, but it's really picked up a hotel district right near the airport. A lot of new hotels going in there as well. 5,000 hotel rooms near OIA on 436. Speaking of OIA, they have 18,000 badged employees working there. They just broke the record last year and probably will break it again this year with number of passengers. They serve 45 million passengers from all over the world. And soon enough, OIA will also be the place where you can connect the Bright Line and go all the way down to downtown Miami. think that's got a shot. I think it's been making progress. So in total, OIA has been investing $3.5 billion in expanding to get the south terminal to be able to serve those 45 million passengers or more, and to get the intermodal facility where Brightline is going to come in. They also have room for OIA Connector, Sunrail. I mean, they really prepped up. Finally, Link 436S, which is one of the main routes running on 436, has the highest ridership of all Lynx routes operating at 30-minute headways or more. So there's a few, 2 or 3 routes that serve more people, but those are on 15-minute headways. This is only 30 minutes and is serving close to 1 million passengers a year. So why now? Addressing safety on 436 is critical. Over the past 5 years, there were 40 fatalities, over 40 fatalities on 436. Half of those were pedestrians. So time is of the essence. People are dying on 436. Second, premium transit is vital to compete for high-tech companies and towns. And Amazon gets a lot of the press, but there's a ton of companies, smaller and bigger, that are innovative, that are creative. Those companies and the people that work there and the people who want to work there, they want to be located close to transit, to really good transit. Finally, other regions are investing in premium transit, so Central Florida can't be left behind. And I'm not talking about the Seattle, Phoenix, Denver of the world. We're talking Indianapolis is leaving us behind. Hartford, Connecticut is leaving us behind. Grand Rapids, Michigan. I mean, some of the cities you haven't heard of have better transit than we do. And that shouldn't be the case. So let's go right into the meat of the presentation. We looked at this for a couple of years and we've come up with some recommendations that we're getting community's input on. So I know a lot of people in the region are tired of studies, seeing studies for every which road. So we wanted to come up with something that we could act upon yesterday, something that wouldn't require a lot of capital funding, that LYNX could do on their own, and that would get people at least started to see better transit service. So we have what's called a short-term recommendation. So we would maintain all the local service as is, so that wouldn't change, with the small exception of extending 436S, which right now goes only up to Fern Park, 1792 area, bringing that up to Sunrail. So people don't have to do a forced transfer to go an extra mile. So that seems like a pretty easy, sensible recommendation to make. And so other than local service, we would overlay FastLink, which is LYNX's limited stop express type service that they have already. It would use existing shelters, so look at those locations where ridership is highest and use those locations as stops. And operate at 30-minute headways. So your locals at 30-minute headways, this would be an overlay 30 minutes, so you could potentially get it down to even 15 minutes in some cases. So looking into the future, our long-term recommendation is a bus rapid transit service. So we really want to focus on it being simple, fast, and reliable. That's the core of the service that we want LYNX to provide on 436. So what does that entail? Things like premium buses, having priority at intersections. Given the current ridership and land use, we think a 15-minute headway is most appropriate. It's a good balance between frequency and operating costs. We figured out that there's potential to use dedicated lanes in some of 436, and that could range from running them on the curbside, sharing it with right turners like an International Drive, or running it down the median. So we're still treating that as a possibility. It's just going to require a little bit more study. And we keep the same local service with that little extension into Sunrail. So yeah, this would go OA to Sunrail. It's about 19 miles. And what we really want to highlight is this is a new connection, so people in Orange County along 436 and Seminole County, probably more likely, they can get a straight shot into Sunrail without transfers.
Sunrail where? What's
Altamonte Springs, Sunrail. Yep. So let me bring that back. So it's kind of hard to see the map, but yeah, OIA down to all the way up to Sunrail, so about 19 miles. So another feature of BRT that we think is going to be applicable on 436 is to use stations, not stops. So we want to take that to the next level, looking at off-board ticketing so that people can pay ahead of boarding. It really speeds up the boarding process. We really want to see arrival time displays. We know that LYNX has been making progress with the app, but sometimes it's just easier to go and see a screen at the stop rather than pulling out your phone. Bicycle parking, branding that's unique to the BRT system. Level boarding or near level boarding, again, that helps speed up the boarding process, especially important for people with limited mobility. Lighting and other amenities that we've actually surveyed the community to see what do you really want at the bus stop. And so we've got a good list of things that we can include as well. This is very important. It's not really all within LYNX's jurisdiction, but it is important that the bus rapid transit system be supported by ped bike infrastructure, not just along 436, but also on the cross streets. And very importantly, land use policy. So that's where we really need the municipalities to step up and encourage that transit supportive development, especially around the stations, pretty much all throughout 436. Things that we want to see and things that we're recommending in this regard: wider sidewalks. The volumes on 436, speed on 436, they're not really conducive to all ages, all abilities, bicycle riding. So we think that an off-street path is better for bicyclists. So if we get those wide sidewalks, they can become a shared use path that's going to be more comfortable, safer. Shade, Miles talked about, the high heat and humidity. So if we can provide a lot of street trees with shade, that's going to make that transit trip a lot more comfortable. More crossings. This was pretty big too for safety. Less speeding. So we're working with DOT as part of this project, and as part of another project that we have directly with DOT, to come up with ways to reduce speeding on 436, because that's it's a critical issue that relates to those fatalities that we talked about earlier. Affordable multifamily housing, ideally close to those transit stations, and a mix of use and healthy densities of land use. So again, this is really a lot, but we just wanted to show off that we came up with a lot of recommendations. Some of them are ongoing, like what I mentioned with the speeding, but there's a lot that we can start doing now. And then we've got another set that are longer term. We've put 2025 plus. That would be the timeline we're expecting for the bus rapid transit service, because that is more capital expensive, and I have to go up, knock on some doors for funding, and those things take time. But yeah, we've got a ton of recommendations. Touched on money. So how much do we need to build the system? If we go with some of the concepts we have now, where we're putting that transit on the curbside, so we've got the top picture here on the left is sort of like what you see on iDrive, is the bad lane concept, where you've got the transit sharing the right-of-way with right turners. So there's about 40% of the corridor where you have right turn lanes long enough to make this workable. Otherwise, it would run in mixed traffic. So that's our bad lane concept. We also have a concept here in the bottom left where we repurpose the outside through lanes as transit exclusive. So that brings down the vehicular lanes to 4, plus the 2 transit ones. So what you see here on the left is no widening of 436 for any significant stretch. So that's why that cost of 60 to 80 million. So a lot lower than the other cost here, where you're widening to accommodate new lanes for transit and keeping the same number of lanes for autos. That's going to run 250 million plus. So again, we're still in concept stage when it comes to the running ways. So we may get up something that mixes these concepts and with a price tag somewhere in the middle. In terms of operating the BRT, that's an important consideration that a lot of the municipalities have, because the capital expense, a lot of that can come from the federal government, can come from the state DOT, but this has to come from the locals. So they want to know how much per year they're going to have to pony up to operate the BRT. So we've calculated that with that 15-minute headway and other operational characteristics to be around $4 million per year. Just as a comparison, LYNX spends around $160 million per year on operating the existing system. So, I mean, it's a sizable amount, but it's not out of whack with what LYNX already spends. So these are the goals that we had when we set at the very beginning of the project, and we kept referring to them throughout the 2-year study. So we wanted to enhance the transit experience. And we've done some calculations, and we can take some of those long trips that are happening on 436. If we implement this, they will go down by about 30 to 45 minutes each day. So if you've got a round trip, you're saving people 30 to 45 minutes on average by having this new system. Safe walking and bicycle. We talked about the wider crosswalks, more crossings, less speeding. Encourage redevelopment. We've identified 19 potential station sites that could serve as a catalyst for new housing and new retail. In terms of automobility, that's something we've kept an eye on because we know it's important. A lot of people here in this region drive. So we just wanted to keep an eye on that, make sure we're not causing gridlock with any of the alternatives. But again, we don't want to emphasize speed. This is not about going faster through 436. This is about more reliable and safer trips. So if you have fewer crashes because there's less speeding and less distraction, your trips are going to be more reliable. You're going to be sure that it's going to be a 25-minute trip rather than, free flow being 15 and then when you have crashes an hour. So we want to keep it reliable, not necessarily mean fast. Implementable improvements. We wanted to keep an eye on what was realistic. Money's tight for a lot of the municipalities here. Money's tight for LYNX. So we had, we couldn't really go and talk about light rail because we know that's $1 billion plus of capital and a lot more on the operations when compared to BRT. So we wanted to keep it realistic. And finally, we did this health impact assessment that went out throughout the duration of the study to keep an angle on public health and how the study could improve that. So how can you help? Any of you are executives or community leaders? Here's some things that we need, to really advance the study. Secure funds for preliminary engineering. So this is what's called an alternative analysis. This is sort of the first step in setting up a project. Next step is called preliminary engineering, where you do a lot of environmental documents, you get to conceptual design and so on. We need money for that. Also need money for the short-term alternative, which we presented earlier on, of having that fast link every 30 minutes. We've calculated that to be about $2 million a year. Again, the locals are in charge of funding transit operations, so that could be a nice point for contribution for executives and community leaders. Finally, we really want them to campaign for dedicated source of transit funding. We don't have that in the region, and when you look at the other cities that have been successful in rolling out systems of premium transit, they always have a dedicated source of revenue for transit. So we need our executives and our community leaders to really push for that. Agency staff or engineers and planners in the room, if you're doing a project in 436, please check the recommendations first and make sure that you can incorporate them as you do your work. And this actually turned out, we just heard from our representative from the city of Castleberry. They're doing a signal redesign, and he came and said, well, what do we have at this location? What can we apply from the study to work into that other study that's already ongoing? And that's a very, I wouldn't say easy, but it's easier to get things done that way than try to come up with new projects. Have your company or your organization fill out a letter of support. Again, for the BRT, we're going to need to go up, knock on some doors to get funding. It helps to have the support of the community. So if you've got an organization that deals with transportation and you feel comfortable getting a letter of support, we have a template that you can work from. Finally, on the citizen side, and regardless of whether you're any of the above, we're all citizens of Central Florida. We got to tell our elected officials that we want better transit. If you have an opportunity to write LYNX, please do so and spread the word. Also follow LYNX for updates on social media. Thank your bus driver. Actually, on the first point, there's a really good opportunity coming up next Tuesday to tell your elected officials that you want better transit. Make sure you take advantage of that. And with that, we've got a website summarizing this on lynxsr436.com/onboard. Thanks again for your time. We can take questions.
And just as a note, we've started Facebook Living our events. People seem to like it. If you really don't want to be on video, tap me on the shoulder and I'll make that happen somehow.
did.
So I write about LYNX and Sunrail, and the key thing with all the stuff is great, and I'm a big fan of what the problem LYNX has is, I think, well, not the problem, I think LYNX does a great job with the resources it has. Here are two numbers that really should tell you a story about. LYNX serves basically 3 counties, has a fleet of about 330 buses. The Orange County School District, which serves 1 county, has 900 buses in its fleet. Now, obviously, they serve different purposes and stuff like that. The key thing is the funding and the political piece. We can talk this other stuff to death if we want to, but there's not been an appetite, and I've been here in Orlando since 1984, to treat, and I think the first gentleman started talking about the demographics of a LYNX rider, and basically, they're poor people. And poor people really don't have a really strong advocate. And our elected officials don't really ride the public transit, so they don't know, they don't really care. It needs more money. It needs that dedicated funding source. The same thing that Sunrail needs to survive is the same thing that LYNX needs. And by the way, and I write a lot about Sunrail, but honestly, Sunrail gives about 5,000 rides a day. LYNX does, 84,000 rides a day. Big friggin' difference.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. I'm optimistic that the municipalities are going to have to come up with some sort of transit funding as Sunrail transitions from the DOT to the locals in 2021. So I think there's a silver lining to that, and it's that there's pressure and urgency to come up with something quick.
But make sure they don't leave LYNX out, because Sunrail serves the north-south corridor,
Yep.
and a lot of people live east and west. I mentioned Pine Hills before. People who ride the bus out in Pine Hills who never interact with Sunrail because it doesn't go into any place that they need to go to. So it's important to not get left out.
Yeah, so hopefully we can frame it as a transit funding, not just Sunrail. Question over?
Yeah, my question was for Miles. He mentioned that he has partners with the city in Orange County. Do they provide any type of funding for LYNX?
Oh, yes. So,
And what are your other dedicated funding sources?
So dedicated might not be the most appropriate word. Oh, there are formula funds that we do receive from the federal government. That formula relates to both the population and our ridership. So ridership is very important to us, not just to be a service provider, but in terms of staying operational. About 25%, if I'm wrong, please correct me, of our revenue comes from passenger fares. There are grants that are competitive that we apply for to startup services, service development grants from FDOT. Those tend to be like seed monies for about 2 years. In addition to that, it's a lot of contribution from Orange County as our primary operating area, and then Osceola County and Seminole County. City of Orlando also pays for the limo service in entirety downtown. There are a couple routes out in the periphery in Polk County that are paid for 100% by Polk County. That's the gist of the funding assignment this state. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So, but to say, the municipalities obviously paying to the county, the residents there reside, and there are some municipalities that allocate funds specifically, but we don't have direct agreements with them. It might be with the county passing through utilities.
Well, and if I understand it, part of the issue is they have to reauthorize the funding every year, each jurisdiction.
Every year, LYNX does need to go through its budget approval process, and it's a process. Correct.
So if some city is having a tough time for some reason, or some entity that provides, that could be a problem. The real goal is to have something like, at one time they talked about having a rental car surcharge, like
Right.
$1 in every rental charge. Orlando's like the biggest rental car market in the world.
Correct.
But the rental car industry and their, advocates kind of shot that down. But you need something that's just steady that you can count on before you can build the system out to what it really needs to be.
That sounds like a fantastic idea, yes.
And just to add on that, if you've got that steady source of revenue and you're getting year after year, you can release bonds early on with that revenue to pay it back, and you can get the system built a lot quicker. So that's why that's really important. Nathan.
One question for each of you. So, Jorge, you include in the study some figures as to what the capital and operational costs would be? Do you have figures as to what the economic impact would be, since it's focused in a corridor with a lot of jobs and a lot of residential concentration, to implementing the higher frequency service, thereby giving more access to jobs, reducing commute times, like the things that would actually make a difference in the bottom line and offset the investment into the infrastructure?
Yep. So we engaged a market analyst as part of this study, and it helped us really ground truth whether the development that we think, the transit support development, really makes sense for a place like 436, and we got some good feedback that way. She did not get into an economic impact figure, but I would point you to some of the stuff that Miles has put up on this briefing document that's a little more generalized. But for example, property values on average go up 42% as a result of high frequency public transit. So that would translate into more revenue for the municipalities if we were to go and implement this.
To kind of piggyback on that, so especially with bus rapid transit instead of like a rail system, you don't necessarily create new development opportunities, you just help focus what was already going to happen within that watershed. So we can see more concentrated on the corridor, so then it becomes more transit oriented instead of transit proximal development. And it can also speed up the timeline in which it occurs. So then they can start capturing the tax revenue from that tomorrow instead of 10 years from now.
Does that, if you were to go into a specific economic impact assessment for this one project along 436, is it even possible to capture the economic impact on kind of the aggregate individual lives of reducing commute times, and what that does for individuals?
So something really awesome that Jorge put together for us was kind of modeling out the real world travel patterns and changes that we would see with 436. Care to talk about that?
Yeah,
more
and
detail?
Nathan's very familiar with it.
That was not a leading question.
But yeah, we came up with this way to basically simulate how people who are currently using LYNX, and thanks to that OD survey that Miles talked about earlier on, would experience this new system. So using some open source software, we created the system and then had people go from their origins, walk to the stop, destination, and figure out that that's where we came up with that number that on average people would save 30 to 45 minutes. There's, you can put a dollar value to time, right, and convert that to the savings that people would realize. So I'm sure the economic impact could be done, we just didn't do it as part of the study. It would be significant.
It seems to me that might be a helpful, way to help communicate the value of investing that as you're looking for funding sources.
Yep.
And saying it's not just that we need X millions of dollars, it's that this X millions of dollars unlocks this X millions of dollars in economic impact, right?
And that's what gets done a lot with infrastructure projects, be it overpasses, interchanges, and so on. They calculate how much time people would save in that peak hour and multiply it by the dollar value of time. You've got this benefit cost. So yeah, it's a good idea.
And then Miles, I had a question for you. What kinds of outreach have you guys done, or are you planning on doing with the redesigned system, just in terms of engaging everyday riders beyond doing the onboard surveys of the travel patterns, but like starting to engage the community as to the potential upcoming changes,
right?
Getting feedback, and if you have already been getting some of that feedback, what have you been hearing?
So in the development of the system, and as part of, we kind of did the route optimization study as part of our mandatory transit development plans. We had a major update we did last year, and part of that was to a requirement from the state, right? So we do this big update. We decided to sync it up with route optimization. So there's a requirement for public outreach during that process. So that's how we got a lot of the ideas, the emphasis points on pure transfers, more direct, real-time passenger information. And that fed a lot then into the route optimization study. Since that time, there's been minimal engagement. Now, we are obviously nowhere close to being done with that. We kind of have a second phase that we're getting ready to engage and move forward with in terms of making that long-term plan a tomorrow plan, or maybe a year and a based off of resources becoming more available. So in that, there's an ideal time of several months leading up to that you would hit the ground, reach out to community leaders, go to every commission meeting that you're allowed to attend, any kind of regularly scheduled event is the best thing for us to piggyback off of. And we're good at the basic stuff and the requirements, but we're definitely going to be employing people to help us be better, more noticeable in all of that. And that's going to continue on whenever we push go and flip the system. That's going to carry on for several months after the fact. It takes a while for people to catch on. There's 60,000 people moving to Central Florida every year. So there's a lot to continue to educate. What someone relocating here might have seen as the system will not be what they show up to. And so yeah, we understand that there's a lot that we can do before and during the actual new system.
Question over there?
How would a recession impact your outlooks? Because you have a plan that's like 2025 plus, but so let's say there's a recession that happens within the next 2-4 years. How would that impact the projections?
Well, because every year, as it is now, we go back and ask for funding from our local partners, you would see probably some punting going on, delaying of any big capital expenditures, recognizing that there are a lot of necessary services that the counties and the cities have to provide, and it would just be another level of negotiation like we have today. So it's a little easier today because times are all right. It's not unfamiliar to us. You know, the last downturn in 2007, 2008, we did see a reduction in services. It delayed a lot of our plans. That's why some of the corridor studies for like 192 and 50 happened not until 2013, 2015, 2016. And that's really all we can do. So then at that point, it would be keeping the programs and projects in people's minds, whatever updates we have to do, but it would absolutely, without a dedicated funding source, negatively impact what we would be able to deploy for Central Florida.
So, and I like to look at the silver lining and everything. And I think if there's a downturn in the market, with the capital expenses, you know, those big numbers are showing the, you know, tens of millions. Not all of that comes from local. So a lot of it comes from the federal government and state DOT. So those revenues may be there, may even be more if there's some kind of stimulus to try to jack the economy back up. And then on the flip side, building gets a lot cheaper. So right now, if you go try to build something, you'll pay twice what you would have paid in 2011 because everybody's working on I-4 or everybody's working on the guideline. So if there's a downturn, that price tag could come down by tens of millions. And it's a question of whether you can get the funding up to build it during that time frame.
Okay, so I like how you talked about having BRT on 436, but the idea of having both local and rapid service works in New York City because their subway network is frequent, but in other cities where the transit service is less frequent, Nashville being one of them where I just came from, it's been where they've actually tried to do that, like have a BRT light and a local bus service on its high frequency corridors. And what they found was that people didn't make their decision of which bus to board based on whether it was rapid or local. They made their decision on when they wanted to travel and which bus came first.
Right.
So where National NCA has moved more towards having more of a hybrid route, and they actually have one on a corridor that's similar to Semoran in terms of demographics, where it's like you have more stop spacing than a local bus service, but less, but it's not quite to the same extent as a full-on BRT.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you may have considered that.
We've definitely acknowledged it, separate from 436, but how we want to deploy limited stop as a layer throughout the whole system. And it's unique in every city. So depending on the environment, depending on the culture, there's a level of self-selection between those two. At some point in time, the riders do adapt and acknowledge what is for them. Is it first bus, I'm out? Or is it, you know what, if I game this right, the shorter trip will actually win out if I am proximal to like a limited stop. Or do I take the local to the limited and carry on from there? So it's something that's happening in South Florida right now too. So what they saw was a little different as they deployed both, and the ridership actually gravitated more towards the limited stop service, so they reduced the local and put more funds and even more frequency on that. So there was still the services, just one was much more robust than the other one as opposed to how it started. Yeah, it's a living system.
So we're gonna let it play out for a few years and see what the
Exactly.
transfer
Each
point
year,
is.
and then you can kind of react to the schedules on that.
I appreciate the kind of the essential recommendation to move the transfer from 436 south to north over to the Sunrail station. And I've heard, the last few years, requests more or less to see the 1792 routes also move to that station.
Sure.
So, but my question is, throughout this study for 436, it dawned on me that we have in Orange County, LYNX Station, LYNX Central Station, and then now in Osceola County, we have the Intermodal Center. In these conversations, has it come up, and maybe what's the feeling for LYNX, for the partners in the area of kind of graduating either the Sunrail Station or land adjacent to it to a Seminole County Intermodal Center, kind of complete the three counties?
So that came up before we even began this project. As soon as we mentioned we were going to start looking on 436, we had inquiries about what are you going to do with that transfer center there for and calling it a transfer center is generous for those of you who have experienced it. It's on the backside of the High Line property there in 1792. It's very basic in terms of the amenities that are afforded to the passengers there, and it's unpleasant because it's next to just an empty parking lot. We're being frank. So yes, we did look at what could be done there. There are part of our project. We looked at the northeast corner of that, so actually Castleberry, what could be done with that area, and as it relates to the CRA of the city of Castleberry, and building out a BRT station area within there, community center, if you will, and some potential redevelopment. We've acknowledged the Sunrail proximity and that it's a built facility with existing bus bays. That gets back to appetite for an operational expense increase, and it's not really an impact on the 436 routes. You're shifting the transfer point either from 1792 to the Sunrail station, but deviating those 1792 routes is about $1 million more a year for no real benefit in terms of ridership. So that bridge is what it has been for the past few years to cross. Our partners in Seminole County are examining potential of that highlight property where we currently exist. So how things progress, there's potential for us to maybe stay in that area but see better facilities and more robust passenger experience in that general property.
So you talked about reducing transfers, but one idea from Jared Walker in his famous book was to not try to avoid transfers, but to just have routes running in straight lines.
Yeah.
And having just one transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And like applying that to LYNX could be even getting rid of Central Station and having people just maybe transfer intersections.
Right.
I'm wondering if that's an idea that's been considered, what your thoughts are on that?
So part of it was recognizing that we don't own a lot of land or property, so we're not going to totally abandon what we have, but recognizing, yes, the points that people like Jared Walker make, that you don't need the hub and spoke model. You look at airlines, and only a few can actually pull it off, and they're gigantic airplanes that are moving people across the planet. We are not Dubai. We are Orlando, so we are a small airport, if you will, in terms of the transit arena. So it was emphasizing our existing transit facilities throughout the region in many pulses, if you will. But it's also recognizing that with, like, say, our limited stop services, they would not be deviating from those primary roadways. The local bus might to serve some of those off-site transfer areas or key destinations, but where we could is straighten out the lines. And that's why there was such a hierarchy of services. So the reason why we deploy much more on-demand or flexible kind of zones is because today there might be a bus looping around in there. So instead of doing that, keep it on the primary road and feed that neighborhood or that community into the proper corridor of that. So it's a little different in that it's recognized you can only do so much with a shuttle and an on-demand service. It's designed to be a really good paratransit service, and that's okay because we recognize the limitations of the geography in which we're operating here. So, and the climate.
So on the BRT, we are recommending to stay on 436, and just having people. That's why it's important to get those sidewalks up to shade, the bicycling facilities up to shade, so that people can walk a little bit further if needed.
What's your best case scenario on the rollout? Like if you got a bunch of momentum behind funding and whatever kind of political roadblocks you have
For LYNX Forward or for 436?
to LYNX Forward.
Aiming for something in 2019. So there's obviously a lot of work to do before then in terms of outreach and education and boots on the ground, just from a facility standpoint. But you got to set goals high and sprint towards it as intelligently and professionally as you can. However it plays out, we'll just adapt and
For 436, it's that 2025. That would be going through the regular FDA process, so without relying on dedicated funding coming online at the local level. So still kind of aggressive, but that's our goal. Dave?
What was the number of people you said this could serve? I know you said that earlier in the presentation. What are you talking about?
So when we talked about the number of residents on the corridor, it's 200,000 residents, 100,000 jobs. In terms of ridership, 436S sees around 3,500 roughly a day. With the project, that could go up to 5,000 and change between the local and the BRT.
Okay.
Cool.
Any-
Thank you all so much for spending the evening with us and letting us share our exciting ideas.
Thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your work with us. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody next month, same time, same place, last Tuesday of the month. The topic has not yet been announced, but if you want to know what it is, make sure to follow us on Facebook or give me your card and I can add you to our partner email list for CNU Orlando. Thanks, everybody.